on the topic that I'm going to present today, which is on the hero's journey, which is a concept in personal development that we can use as support staff and to understand the athletes a bit better. So I'll just give you a quick introduction, jump straight into it. So what is the hero's journey? Well, basically the hero's journey was come up with by a guy called Joseph Campbell. He was an American author, and what he did is he studied cultures all around the world, and what he discovered that there was a 12-stage narrative or story that was underneath all of them, and it's a universal, what he called monomyth and cross-cultural. So and be the same in Australia as it would be in Asia, as it would be in Europe and North America. It's common things that occur in stories all around the world. So basically what he discovered is that the hero's journey is as much an internal journey as it is external, or what the person feels and what happens to them about their story, and what happens in the outside world as well as themselves. So he came up with that it was broken down into 3 core stages. So in the first stage you had the separation, the initiation and the return. So basically the person would start in the ordinary world at the top, go down into what he called the special world and come back around on their journey, okay? So there's 12, as I said, core areas. We'll go into this now in a bit more detail, and I'll give you a practical example to this, where it would occur in your own lives. You can think for yourself where it sort of applies, and where it also applies to in athletes' life, and the athletes we work with here, the elite athletes in Malaysia. So basically, in explaining the story, I'm going to talk a bit about myself, how I ended up coming to ISN and working in Malaysia, a bit about in popular culture, because as I said, it's cross-cultural. It goes into all different cultures, so it's in music, it's in films, it's in books, and these are just a couple of popular culture examples that I'll include. And then in elite sport, so how does it apply to Malaysia? So first stage you have it's what's called separation. So the first stage is call to adventure. So this is when the person is leading in their ordinary life. So this is before something happens to call them to adventure. So basically, in that case, for myself, so last summer I was working for a tour company in Ireland. So this is Paddy Wagon Tours. So I was sitting on a bus like that and guiding people like with a mic like this and telling them all about Ireland and singing them songs and things like that. And then up pops the job in ISN. And I applied for a job, and that's how I ended up here. So that was sort of the call to adventure. So it's the first stage. So if you can think of any stage in your life where you maybe start a new job or a new relationship or things like that, this is sort of the first stage, call to adventure. In popular culture, we have Harry Potter. So Harry Potter was living a very ordinary life. He was living under the stairs in the house, and then what does he get? He gets the letter to call him to go to Hogwarts. So he gets called to go on an adventure. Also in Lord of the Rings, where we have the scroll, where Frodo gets the scroll, and Bilbo Baggins, and going back all the way to the beginning of Lord of the Rings, that's to something that initiates the journey, called to adventure, okay? So if we apply it to an athlete, so I came up with a hypothetical example. Say we have an athlete that is a badminton player in Malaysia, we'll just call him John. So John is the badminton player in Malaysia, and he gets selected to go on to the podium or become a world-class athlete at the top level. So maybe he's played for a state and now he's made up to the top level. So he gets his letter to invite him to come on to podium or come on to high performance. The second part of the circle when you're going around is called refusal of the call. So this is very common, as I said, cross-culturally. The person at this stage will doubt themselves. They see some barriers, real or imaginary, like internal. They doubt that they can do what they want to do. Like in this case, as I said, with myself coming here, I got this email about 3 weeks before I came to ISN. This email is from the Irish Army. I got invited to join the Army Reserve, and this is to go for a fitness test and an interview. I got this about 3 weeks before I came. Also, I'm a qualified PE teacher, so I had the option to stay working in PE, physical education teacher, before I came here. And then thirdly, this is myself, my 2 sisters, Orla and Sinead, and my grandmother, that was her 85th birthday a couple of weeks before we came. Unfortunately, she actually passed away a few weeks after that. Before I came, she wasn't that sick. Like she lived to a great age, but basically she got a chest infection, and she also had emphysema, which is a disease of the lung. But one sort of, I suppose, funny story now looking back, I actually had to bring her to the hospital before, and when I was bringing her to the hospital, I went up, knocked on the room, went in, and she was still smoking right up to the very end. So even though she had a chest infection, she was still smoking. So she was sort of very set in her ways, like, but also taught a lot of people in the family different things. So she's a great woman. So in terms of Harry Potter, well, there's another one. There's another great example. You know, I can't be a wizard. The person thinks, whether it be in film or whatever, there's some doubt as to whether they can do something. So we applied it to an athlete. Here's our athlete, John. John now has to face the media. He has different commitments. He's a bigger profile. He's representing Malaysia on the world stage. So how is that going to go? He's doubting himself that now he's onto the top level to represent Malaysia and everything that goes with that as well. The last part, sort of the first stage, if that makes sense, is meeting the mentor. Usually in the case of the hero's journey, it takes the form of an older male, and this provides the hero with some guidance, a gift or advice. Okay. So for myself, before I left, this is where I live. This is the capital of Ireland. This is Dublin. And I met a guy called Tony a couple of weeks before I came out. Now Tony was a friend of a friend, if that makes sense. He was an English lecturer back in Dublin. He lectured. He was one of these guys who was he was very, I suppose, deep and like reflective, and he gave great advice. And so I had lunch with him for like a good few hours, and we were talking about life and different things before I came out. And he actually gave me a gift. So usually you get given a gift. So I get given a book because he had a big library in his house. So he gave me a gift which is really nice and very thoughtful. But looking back at the time, it fits perfectly into this because it was sort of a really symbolic thing before you go away to be given something. So in popular culture, Star Wars, Obi-Wan gives Luke Skywalker, older male, gives him the gift of lightsaber at the beginning. Lord of the Rings gets given the ring. Using the example again of John, our badminton player, he might meet an ex-Olympian. He might meet someone that competed for Malaysia many years before. He might go back to his compound, to his village, meet an elder, give him advice to go on to the next level. So he gets over that doubt, so he's able to go on the adventure. So crossing the threshold, so this is when we go down to the bottom of the circle. This is when the person goes on the adventure. So they cross the threshold is what Campbell described it as. So the person leaves the ordinary world and go on his or her adventure. So for myself, I didn't realise this picture was taken. My sister took this picture. That's me actually leaving Dublin Airport to fly here. That's a picture off the plane that I took in Dublin Airport leaving to come here. There we have Bilbo Baggins going on his adventure, Lord of the Rings. And then we have obviously all the athletes. So if we again use John, if John came from Sarawak, he came from Johor or whatever, he might never have lived in Kuala Lumpur, he might never have been in like a centralised programme. So coming from all over, so you have to sort of allow for that, I suppose, with the athletes that come from completely different backgrounds. So as we get down the circle, this is probably the hardest stage. It's known as the innermost cave, also known as the belly of the beast or slaying the dragon. So this is where the individual faces a huge trial for themselves personally. And it usually tests his or her values, beliefs and understanding of the world. So for me, obviously I was coming nearly 17,000 miles across the world. So that's Dublin there, Ireland, the island. Flew down, landed in Abu Dhabi on the way. And as soon as I got into Abu Dhabi airport, like everything was different. All the people, the dress, the language, you know, I had no sort of reference point. So, as I said, food was different as well when I landed in Malaysia. With different languages, different way of communication, different customs. So I was trying to sort of get used to that as quickly as I could and like understand the culture and understand the customs. So in Pinocchio, you have Geppetto and Pinocchio. There's the whale, so there's like a literal interpretation of the story. So Pinocchio gets swallowed by the whale, so he's in the belly of the beast and facing the trial. Also we have Star Wars again, because George Lucas, who directed Star Wars, was actually friends with Joseph Campbell. That's why in Star Wars, all around the world it's so popular, because even if you can't understand the language of the film, all the set pieces and things in the film. So this is where he crashes on the planet and he meets Yoda. He actually meets the mentor as well. And he crashes, and as you can see, it's in the belly of the whale, like the way it's sort of lit where he crashes. And then in Trek, he rescues Princess Fiona from the castle, so he has to slay the dragon, get over the lava, and he faces the trial and comes back. So for the athlete, in this hypothetical example, John breaks his hand on a service hand, and obviously badminton being the most popular sport in Malaysia, he might get isolated from his group, so he has to sort of really overcome those challenges. his KPIs or what things he has to hit to stay on funding might come in jeopardy. So what is he going to do in terms of like facing the biggest trial? As you come back up the circle then, you have the reward. So the person receives something physical or metaphorical for overcoming his or her challenge. And the classic example of darkness just before the dawn. So you face a big challenge, and just after that comes a reward. So for me personally, it was starting to work, like I said. It's pretty self-explanatory, because I'd always wanted to do a job like this where it was working with athletes, and with myself and Lindsay and Chris doing performance lifestyle, like we get to interact with the athletes a lot one-on-one, and sort of work and help them in like education, career, personal development, stuff like this. So it was something I was really passionate about, so to get to work with them was brilliant. And then the reward, Shrek gets the deed to a swamp. So the king, after he rescues Princess Fiona, gives him the deed to a swamp, and he now owns a swamp. John, our imaginary athlete, our example for badminton, wins a gold medal at the Commonwealth Games, goes to Tokyo, and then becomes the flag bearer at Tokyo, which is a big honour, obviously, that he's selected out of all the other athletes to carry the flag. So stage 3, return. So there's the last two stages when you're coming back up, and you're at this stage you're returning back into your ordinary world. So you've learned something in your special world, and you're coming back up. So he called it the return with the elixir. So the hero's been transformed and learned something new about his world, and his perspective has changed. So for me, obviously Chinese New Year. I came here, never experienced Chinese New Year. Different sport. I'd never worked with 10-pin bowling. It's the 10-pin bowling men's team. The food, which is fantastic. So the food, playing different sports, that's playing Gaelic football and Australian rules, like in time off, and also seeing all the sights as well. So the return of the lecture, there we have Simba. So in The Lion King, he's a little small cub, then he goes on all his trials, comes back and becomes the Lion King. And in Star Wars, Luke blows up the Death Star, end of the film, and everyone's delighted. So with our athlete then, John goes to the Olympics, gets the homecoming, wins the medal, comes back, he's represented Malaysia on the world stage, and he's become successful. He knows more about himself, more about his relationship to the world and what he has learned, and different things like that. So the last stage, then you have what's called freedom to live. In this stage, the hero returns to the ordinary world completely. He's profoundly changed by his experiences, both internally and externally. So for me, I think now I more deeply understand my values as a person working here. I much more understand Malaysian culture, Bahasa, the language, the customs, because of working here and having to embrace that. It was really great to learn all that so quickly. I know where I come from, like who I represent and what I represent, and also helping Malaysian athletes win on the world stage, like, and that they represent the country and know what that means. So there we have Star Wars again. So Luke has come back off his amazing journey and knows more about himself and his place in the universe. So then we have our athlete. So John has come all the way back and he's returned to his ordinary life, having gone on his big journey. He knows more about himself physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and so that when he does go on to retire and transition out of sport, he knows more about himself. Okay, Ciaran, thank you very much.
Stage 2, when the hero, let's say you meet some barriers, afterwards then you sort of went into the belly of the beast.
Yes.
So how actually he wants to get out of that place. Usually it associated with depression, isn't it? Or some sort of emotional.
Yeah, it can be a negative, but obviously can be a positive. Some people in this might never get out of the belly of the beast, like they might stay in there. So, like for example, like if you were working and doing a job you didn't like to do, but you didn't have the sort of goal to change that, you would remain stuck in sort of the belly of the beast. So as I said, it's probably the hardest part of the journey to get over, like, because some people give up at that stage, but the reward is so big for getting past that stage. If that answers the question, but you can apply it to that scenario you're saying. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Someone from my own department.
Thank you, Ciaran. I'm just interested in the role of the mentor. So from your experience working in performance lifestyle, can you give an example of how performance lifestyle and the role of the mentor assists the athletes in that phase?
Yeah, that's a great question. I suppose the work we do, working with the athletes, we're empowering and supporting them. We're not trying to fix anything for them. Like, there's nothing sort of wrong that we fix. It's more empowering, so the athlete doesn't become dependent on us. We're trying to make them the better, more rounded person, so that they can go out into the world after they retire, or even while they're competing. So basically, if we were the mentor to the athletes, it's basically trying to empower and just help them to make them better themselves, like that they can then handle it themselves.
Thank you.